Porsche Cayman prices are no longer moving in parallel. 718 prices continue to fall after their peak, while 981 and 987 prices are showing signs of bottoming and stability. All of this is very different from the previous period in which the complete market increased and topped. Now for you as a buyer, this means of course that there might be significantly more wiggle room in the price for let's say a 718 than for a 987 or 981. But it's not quite as simple as this. You see, also within these segments there are some differences in the price trends. GT4s are for example doing extremely well. In this video you'll get an update on the latest market trends, and this is of course key information if you're a buyer, seller or just someone who likes to track values like me. As always, we'll start with a quick market overview before looking at the price trends. Over here we have the market at the end of February 2023, so this video is delayed by a month. Initially I didn't plan to make this video, as the previous market update is only 3 months old. But all the requests following the Boxster market update a few weeks ago persuaded me. Let's have a look. In total there are 377 cars for sale, and this is 23% less than 3 months ago, so the market is changing. In this video we'll cover all the generation and model types. We will not go too much into detail when it comes to the different price levels, but like many Porsche models, I think it's interesting to see how much overlap there is between the different models. Our models are, for example, priced at the same level as low mileage 718s, and 981 GT4s are priced similar to the 4-liter GTS. You can see that as long as your budget sits around $80,000, you can almost choose every model. Thankfully though, prices already start at $18,000, and this makes it attainable for many first-time sports car buyers. At the other end of the price range we find the GT4 RS, and well, what's there to say? Prices are 2 times as high as for the normal GT4. Is it worth it? I leave that decision up to you. Now the graph that you just saw looks completely different than the same graph 1 year ago. Though, compared to 3 months ago, the decrease rate started to decrease in some markets. Perhaps this is the start of a market bottom. There are many reasons as to why this could be the case, but of course also a bunch of reasons as to why the most recent developments in the price trends could just be noise. This is extensively discussed in last week's video, so you can click over here if you want to get an update on the complete exotic car market. Now all these speculations about potential price bottoms don't apply to the 718 market. Prices over there are still decreasing. Let's dive into that and then work our way backwards to the 987 generation. Over here we have the price trends for the 718 base, S, T and GTSs. Now compared to May 2022, which was the market top for many models, prices are down by 13% in the base, 7% in the GTS, 11% in the S and 10% in the T market. In monetary terms, this means that prices decreased by $6,000 to $9,000. Looking at the trends, there are hardly any indications that things will change. Prices in the S market were stable during the last 3 months, as supply plummeted by 40%. But trends in the other market are clearly pointing down. Compared to May 2020, prices are still up by 7 to 11%. So there's no reason to panic if you're a long-term owner. If we move to the 6 cylinders, we can see that 4-liter GTS prices are also trending down. In fact, prices are down by 13% or $16.4 thousand. That's not a small drop. GT4s are down by 9%, but prices stabilized during the last 3 months. But this only applies to cars from model year 2022 and 2021. Cars from model year 2022 decreased by 4%. The newer the car, the larger the traditional depreciation effect. So summing up the 718 market, we can say that price trends are still pointing down. This is the latest Cayman generation, and new cars simply depreciate more than older cars. This is something that didn't really occur during the last 2 years, but we are slowly moving back to more normal price dynamics. The GT4 market could be an exception to this. We saw a flat price development during the last 3 months, but one observation is of course too little to base any conclusions on. Prices in the 981 Cayman market are also down compared to their market top of last summer, but the price trends appear to be a little bit stronger than in the 718 market. Let's have a look. Now, without looking at the numbers, we can already see that price trends flattened in the GT4, base and S market, and were stable in the GTS market. Compared to their market top in May, GTSs are down by 4%, S's by 8%, base models by 10% and GT4s by 12%. So as you can see, these numbers are approximately the same as in the 718 market. As we discussed in last week's video, these latest developments aren't sufficient to conclude that this market bottomed. Far from it. But it does signal that things could change soon. So it could be advantageous to monitor this market closely. It will be interesting to see how this looks in May, especially in relation to the 718. Will we see an increasing gap in the value development between the two? Some Cayman owners wouldn't even consider a 718, while others don't seem to mind the 4-cylinder. Now, compared to February 2020, we can only conclude that 981 prices have been fairly strong. They're still up by 8 to 15%, and this doesn't apply to all cars. Many are back at their pre-pandemic level. Another market in which price trends have been stable is the one for the 986 Cayman. Over here we have the trends for the base, S and Rs in the 987.2 market, so probably the 987 you want. This graph though comes with a big disclaimer. Supply in this market is low, so we cannot read too much into each and every price change. See this big increase in the R market over here? It's not a real price increase. The median mileage of the cars that were for sale dropped from 30 to 10,000 miles. Nevertheless, keeping that increased uncertainty in mind, we can see that prices have been stable since August 21. S's have the largest supply level and therefore potentially the most reliable price trend. They decreased by 4% over the complete period. With 11 and 15%, the numbers are higher in the R and base market, but supply dipped as low as 2 cars during this period. Luckily for us, the 987.1 market is a lot bigger and the price trends a lot more reliable. We can see that prices in the base and S market were stable between August 21 and 22, then decreased by 7 and 14% only to stabilize during the last 3 months. Compared to August 21, prices are down by 4% in the S market and by 14% in the base market, and this equals $1.5 to $4,000. Now I need to point out though that supply in the base market decreased massively during the most recent 6 months. There were only 14 cars for sale in February. Therefore, I think that the most recent development in the price trends is more reliable in the S market than in the base market. Supply in the S market also decreased, but still sits at 38 cars. So we check now all the latest developments in the 718, 981 and 987 market. Price trends in the 718 market are all pointing down, with exception of the one for the GT4. 981 prices also came down, but depreciation rates decreased during the last 3 months. Prices in the 987 market also came down slightly, but much less than for the other 2 generations. But before you set out to sell your Cayman or to buy one, you need to know 2 additional things. First, and we already discussed this a bit, supply plummeted. Second, scarcity levels are still decreasing. And these 2 things might seem contradictory, but they aren't. Let's start with the supply level. Over here we have the development for the different generations, and only the base, S and GTS models are included. We can see that supply decreased till mid-2021 and soared when prices shot up. It seemed that everybody wanted to get rid of their car and benefit from the increase in demand and high prices. Yet, when price momentum disappeared, so did supply. It quickly fell and, as you can see, has been falling ever since. Supply is currently at the lowest level since 2022. And this means that supply and prices have been falling in parallel. And sometimes this causes confusion. After all else equal, the basic law of supply and demand dictates that a decrease in supply should lead to higher prices. That might be, but in reality, all else equal hardly holds. Demand certainly didn't stay the same. We all know that it increased massively during the pandemic and most likely decreased significantly in the most recent period. We cannot measure demand directly, but we can look at a different metric that combines both demand and supply, and therefore forms a decent proxy for the scarcity level in the market. It is the time that the cars are advertised for sale, and that metric shows us why prices increased, topped and decreased. Over here we have the advertised time in days for the different generations. I also briefly showed this in last week's video. We can see that cars were selling quicker and quicker up until mid-2021, and this is an important point. While prices were still soaring, this metric already turned, indicating that prices were bound to top soon. That's what happened in the first half of 2022. Prices started to decrease. Advertised times continued to increase and have been increasing since mid-2021. And this can only mean one thing. Demand fell quicker than supply, and the scarcity level in the market decreased. Now, based on these trends, there's also no reason to assume that prices would bottom anytime soon. Cars are selling slower and slower, and in fact are selling slower than at the end of 2019 Q3. It takes approximately 60 days to sell a Cayman. Data to calculate this trend is very kindly provided by Autotempest. Autotempest conveniently pulls listings from a bunch of different websites into one place, so that you can browse through all of them. Check out the links in the description to find the Caymans for sale right now. And with that, it's time to wrap up and conclude. Buyers and sellers beware. We are at a very interesting point in the market. Prices have been falling and price trends look the weakest in the 718 market, followed by the 981 and 987 market. In the latter two, prices stabilized during the most recent 3 months, and this fits with a larger market trend where depreciation rates are falling. However, it also aligns with the conclusion of last week's video. There isn't enough evidence to ring the bottoming bell. Yet, now is the moment to start monitoring prices closely and check if there is a change in price dynamics. If you are among the first who notices the changes, you can of course use it to your advantage, irrespective if you're a buyer or a seller. Now, to some this might be a disappointing conclusion. Someone commented under last week's video that all the data and stuff is very interesting, but that the conclusion wasn't very bold. And this ties in nicely with a different comment under the same video. It is incredibly difficult to predict a market in an evidence-based way, or in other words, based on data. I'm very proud that this channel breaks down the car market in a data-driven way and uses this data to make conclusions. This also means that if there are no groundbreaking developments in the data that are indisputable and not based on cherry-picking, conclusions cannot be bold. Just as in real life, things often require a bit of nuance as they are not completely black and white. The last bold conclusion, if you can call it like that, was when prices started to top and later decreased. The moment I saw that price trends were topping across the board, I started to incorporate this in my videos and concluded that at that particular moment it wasn't smart to buy a car, as you would be buying at the market top. Note that this was way before there was a general consensus that the market was topping, and I did then also receive some angry messages from people whose perception of the market collided with the data. Now, bringing all of this back to the Cayman market, we cannot make a bold conclusion like buy now or sell now. The data doesn't fully back up either one of them. I can of course have an opinion of what could happen, but without an evidence-based forecasting model or the data to back up a descriptive conclusion, I am just a guy with an opinion. And I think we already have enough of those. And after that little rant, I would like to thank you all for watching, and I hope to see you next week again for a new video.